married to Hassan Tahiri. I've got my master's from US in education. And I am a teacher now.
I'm Shirley Bakhtiar, married to Mohammad Reza Nematzadeh. I have a BS degree in chemistry from Cal Poly.
Well, who've been presidents?
Well, if you want to, equivalent to Queen Elizabeth would be your president.
Well, not exactly.
Well,
that is
okay, then talk about
the
Mrs.
show.
Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher.
She'd be our king.
I'm talking about Mrs. Thatcher.
Oh, Mrs. Thatcher.
She would be your imam.
She'd be prime minister. Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher.
I didn't ask a question.
Yes?
Is it possible for women to study Islamic laws? Can you go to the law school?
Yes, they can study Islamic. We have a woman right now. What is her name? Well, we have in Qom there are 5 women who are Islamic jurisprudence.
But I mean you can have Islamic judges who are women.
قاضی ها میشه که زن باشن.
جواب فرشته بگیم که در تاریخ سطر اسلام بودن قانونش هست الان نیستن ولی
There's never been a civil law written that women can or cannot participate. And once the Constitution is established, this will be discussed. She had permission to. She had permission to be a jurist in the beginning of Islam. There were women who had permission to be jurists.
Who gave permission?
Teenagers, the jurisprudence.
So it's not a basic right.
Oh, well, the men also get permission. The men also get permission from the jurist to become a jurist.
Well, you have to do an examination.
You have to take it, you have to study. You have to study and meet an examination and qualify.
Yes, I know.
But it's not a question of men or women.
I understand that, but as a man, when you want to go to Islamic law school, you can. Can you, as a woman, without permission for your prayer?
Yes, if you're qualified, if you meet the qualifications, you can. And the qualifications are not, are you a man or a woman? That's not one of the qualifications.
You know the expression by...
They feel that it's an agreement that they have with their husbands. It's not a question of him saying you have to do this. I mean, if you look at something in theory and you look at something in practice, they're two very different things. And when you stand outside of something and say the theory says this, therefore I am afraid of that theory, therefore I won't participate, that's a very different thing than having faith that nobody's going to mislead you. Having the trust that it's all going to be okay. And you go along with it, and then you think it doesn't exist there. In other words, when a woman can feel assured that her husband is not, if he believes in Islam, I mean if he's a practicing Muslim, will not go and decide to change his wife according to his whim. He will not decide that he thinks that, you know, he could get a better woman. I mean, it's not, none of those kind of things happen when there's a basic trust between a man and woman. The idea of the Islamic woman, which has not really been understood, is that Islam gave women rights long before women in the West had these rights. According to the Quran, the woman has economic rights which do not exist and which are just recently being given to women in the West. She has a right to inherit her own money from her parents. This inheritance she can use any way she wants. Her husband has no right to interfere with that, but of course they discuss it. If she agrees with further recognition that a woman has in her life is that she develops her children in order to be people who are children.
Elaborate on your idea how this could be explained to the Americans to be a rational act and a part of the revolution. And you think they will ever understand?
Understanding. And there's been a great deal of good feelings between us as students in the United States and between the American people. But we feel that the publicity and the propaganda that is presented by the government or by the large corporations is not allowing the people to understand what the situation is. There's never been any mention on your part made as to why President Carter doesn't give back the king. I mean, the whole thing is related. It's not a question of the hostages. It's a question of why is he keeping an Iranian who is a criminal according to our laws in the United States? I mean, it has nothing to do with anything else. Well, as to, there is something which I'd like to mention as to understanding. I think understanding is something that through bad translation of things, misunderstandings occur. In this week's Time magazine, on page 14, there, I'll just read this. It says here, then he received a full CIA translation of Ayatollah Khomeini's speech, which included an incredible taunt. The president, said Khomeini, no, make President Carter then think that, not want to come to some kind of an understanding, not want to see that if he has human feelings, he would turn to 35 million people who are saying bring back the king, the Shah, not to one person. I mean, where's your feeling of humanity? Isn't it for 35 million people, or is it for one person? Because one person has money, because one person can pay for his hospital bill, because one person has a private airplane, because one person filled the pockets of all of your propaganda. So you keep that person. In other words, it's your own interests that are involved, and not the interests of a country that says we want this person to be tried so that we can seek our independence. In the same way that the United States 200 years ago sought to get its independence from Great Britain. We're the same way, where they're like the Pilgrims. And if the so that's, if you can see that's a very different translation of what Imam Khomeini said. People have gone into plastic bags and were put on the shelves for 1,400 years ago. In other words, the very fact that you think it's important and you think that we have the mental ability to be able to answer you shows that we haven't gone back 1,400 years. Shows you that we are thinking, active women, and that we have something to say which has not been presented correctly or has not been presented according to the way we say it. In other words, you haven't looked at the majority point of view. American system is based on justice. Whenever there's a wrong, you say, why did they do that? You think, what did they say?
Mrs. Bakhtiar.
Just one more comment for his question. The United States government asking for the extradition of the Shah. And some time ago, the Foreign Ministry wrote letters to the United States government asking for their help in extraditing the Shah to Iran, in getting the Shah to come to Iran.
Of course, you know that Islam forbids taking hostages. Israel and Islamic, there's neither hadith of the Prophet nor of the Imams who say you can. Actually, they say you cannot.
There's a verse of the Quran that says that you can have hostages.
Well, the Prophet denied it in several hadiths, and then Imam Ali denied it in several hadiths.
How do you know Islam very well? I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
How do you know Islam very well?
I lived for years in Egypt and I studied it.
Okay, you studied it. Then if you agree with one, you should agree with others too.
Have you ever considered the fact that Carter might be holding the king as a hostage? Because as the Imam said, if he came back and made it open knowledge as to what exactly went on here, there'd be a lot of heads in the Senate of the United States which would fall, and a lot of interest in the United States which don't want this to happen. So have you ever thought of that one? I mean, that's a revolutionary thought you can give yourself.
Can you give me the story?
This is 49 people are here. It is not just because of perhaps action committed by just that 49. This is related to the history of this country for the past 50 years. And I think so as far as the United States is concerned. 500 people died east of Iran, and when they asked the White House staff, is United States going to help those people who died in earthquake, he laughs. The ADC correspondent tells me in my office that when the oil price of oil went in the United States up, the interest of the people for the oil raised in comparison to the problem of the hostages. These gentlemen here are expert in getting you to the point that is absolutely insignificant. We have a criminal there, whether it's international law, whether it is not, we have in the bottom of our hearts what he has done to this country. And whether they get into nitpicking of